The deafening crack of a pistol shot sent Catherine Norton ducking behind the water barrel as her brother's body hit the dusty street of San Bernardino. The year was 1875, and in that terrible moment, she realized Thomas's gambling debts had finally caught up to them both. The man who fired the shot, Cyrus Blackwell, the most feared loan shark in California, holstered his weapon and turned his cold eyes toward her. "Your brother owed me $5,000, Miss Norton," Blackwell said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent Main Street. "And since he can no longer pay his debts, the responsibility falls to you." Catherine's hands trembled as she rose from behind the barrel, her cotton dress stained with the water that had splashed when she fell. Around her, townsfolk had scattered, peering from doorways and windows at the scene unfolding in the dusty street. "I don't have that kind of money," she whispered, though she knew it wouldn't matter to a man like Blackwell. "No," he agreed with a cruel smile, "but you have something else of value." His gaze traveled the length of her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "Your brother signed papers. Until his debt is paid, you belong to me." The crowd's murmurs grew as Catherine's world collapsed around her. At 22, she had spent the last 4 years trying to keep her brother from self-destruction after their parents died. Now he lay dead, and she would pay the price for his recklessness. "The law won't allow this," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Blackwell laughed, pulling folded papers from his vest pocket. "The law recognizes contracts, Miss Norton. Your brother put you up as collateral. Judge Franklin signed it himself." He gestured to 2 of his men. "Take her to my establishment. She starts work today." As rough hands grabbed her arms, Catherine caught sight of a tall figure leaning against the hitching post outside the saloon. A stranger with a dark Stetson pulled low over his eyes, watching the scene with quiet intensity. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and she thought she saw something stir in his expression, but then she was being dragged away, her future as certain as the California sun beating down on the dusty street. The Golden Nugget, as Cyrus Blackwell mockingly called his establishment, was notorious throughout San Bernardino. Part saloon, part gambling hall, and part brothel, it was a place where fortunes were lost and souls were sold. For Catherine, it represented her darkest nightmare. "You won't be working upstairs," Blackwell told her as he showed her to a small back room with a cot and wash basin. "At least not yet. You'll serve drinks, clean, and keep the customers happy. If you're obedient, maybe that's all you'll ever have to do." His implication was clear. Catherine's cheeks burned with humiliation and rage. "How long until the debt is paid?" $5,000 plus interest, Blackwell said with a smirk. "At 50 cents a day, that's. Well, I'm sure you can do the math, educated girl like you. It would take decades." Catherine felt the weight of despair settling over her. "Get changed," Blackwell ordered, throwing a bundle of red satin at her. "You start in an hour." When the door closed behind him, Catherine sank onto the cot, clutching the garish dress to her chest. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could hear her. She had survived losing her parents. She had survived Thomas's drinking and gambling. She would survive this too. But as she changed into the revealing dress, she wondered if survival would be enough. The saloon grew rowdier as evening descended on San Bernardino. Catherine had been serving drinks for hours, her feet aching in the 2 tight shoes Blackwell had provided. Each time a drunk patron's hand strayed too close, she fought the urge to smash her tray over his head. The other girls, some indentured like her, others working by choice, had given her tips on how to avoid the worst customers and stay in Blackwell's good graces. "Don't make eye contact with the ones who have been drinking too much," advised Millie, a petite blonde who couldn't have been much older than Catherine. "And always, always keep moving. If you stand still too long, they think you're available for other things." It was sound advice, but difficult to follow when the saloon was packed wall to wall with miners, cowboys, and drifters looking to spend their hard-earned money on liquor and company. As she balanced a tray of whiskey glasses, weaving through the crowd, Catherine caught sight of the stranger from earlier. He sat alone at a corner table, his back to the wall, nursing a single glass of whiskey. Without the shadow of his hat brim, she could see his features clearly: strong jawline, straight nose, and eyes the color of a storm-dark sky. Unlike the other men, who shouted and laughed and grabbed at the serving girls, he sat in contemplative silence, watching the room with careful attention. When their eyes met again, Catherine quickly looked away. She couldn't afford to draw any more attention than necessary. But as she turned to head back to the bar, a drunken miner grabbed her arm, spilling whiskey down the front of her dress. "Sit with me, pretty thing," he slurred, trying to pull her onto his lap. "I'm working, sir," Catherine said firmly, attempting to extricate herself from his grip. "Please let go of my arm." The miner's face darkened. "I paid good money in this establishment. You'll do as I say." His grip tightened painfully, and Catherine felt panic rising in her throat. Blackwell had made it clear what would happen if she caused trouble: a beating at best, and at worst, she'd be sent upstairs to work in the rooms where the other girls entertained men privately. Just as she was about to cry out, a deep voice cut through the noise. "The lady asked you to let go." The stranger from the corner table now stood beside them, his presence commanding attention without raising his voice. He wasn't particularly tall, but lean rather than bulky, yet something about him made the miner's bravado falter. "Mind your own business," the miner muttered, but his grip on Catherine's arm loosened slightly. "I'm making it my business." The stranger's voice remained level, but Catherine could sense the steel beneath it. "Let her go, and I'll buy you a drink to make up for the one you spilled." For a moment, it seemed the miner might argue, but something in the stranger's steady gaze made him reconsider. He released Catherine's arm with a grumbled curse. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, rubbing her arm where bruises were already forming. The stranger tipped his hat slightly. "Nathan Quinn," he introduced himself. "You looked like you could use some assistance." "Catherine Norton." She hesitated, aware that Blackwell was watching from across the room. "I should get back to work." Nathan nodded, understanding her predicament. "I'll be around if you need help again, Miss Norton." As Catherine hurried back to the bar, she could feel Blackwell's suspicious gaze following her. The lone shark beckoned her over, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. "Making friends already, I see," he said. "Remember your place, girl. You belong to me until that debt is paid." "I understand," Catherine replied, keeping her eyes downcast to hide the hatred she knew would be visible there. "Good." Blackwell ran a finger down her cheek, making her skin crawl. "Because I'd hate to have to teach you a lesson so early in your employment." Catherine spent the rest of the evening avoiding both Nathan Quinn and Blackwell's attention, though she could feel the former's eyes following her protectively across the room. When the saloon finally closed in the early hours of the morning, she retreated to her small room, exhausted and aching. As she washed the whiskey and cigar smoke from her skin with cold water from the basin, she wondered how long she could endure this life. Her thoughts drifted to Nathan Quinn. There was something different about him, a quiet dignity that stood out among the rough crowd. But she couldn't afford to pin her hopes on a stranger's kindness. In her experience, men only helped women when they wanted something in return. Catherine fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of her brother's blood on the dusty street and the sound of Blackwell's laughter. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it new chores. Catherine was put to work cleaning the saloon before it opened at noon. As she swept broken glass and cigar butts from beneath tables, Millie sidled up to her. "That cowboy who helped you last night," Millie whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "He asked about you after you went to your room." Catherine paused mid-sweep. What did he want to know? Everything. Millie's expression was both curious and concerned. "How you came to be here, how much your debt is, how long you've been working for Blackwell." "What did you tell him?" "The truth, of course. That your no-good brother gambled away everything and signed you over to cover his debts." Millie touched Catherine's arm gently. "Be careful, Kate. Men like that, the quiet, watchful ones, they're usually either lawmen or outlaws. Either way, they bring trouble." Catherine nodded, though her mind was racing. Why would Nathan Quinn be interested in her situation? Was he truly concerned for her welfare, or did he have some other motive? The thought that he might be a lawman gave her a flicker of hope. Perhaps he could help prove that the contract Blackwell held was illegal. But if he was an outlaw, she couldn't afford to become entangled with someone who might make her situation even worse. "There he is now," Millie murmured, nodding toward the batwing doors. Catherine looked up to see Nathan Quinn entering the saloon, the bright sunlight momentarily silhouetting his tall frame before he stepped fully inside. In the daylight, he looked even more out of place in the dingy saloon. His clothes, while practical for riding, were clean and well-maintained, his manner that of a man comfortable with himself. "Morning, ladies," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "Hope I'm not interrupting your work." "The Golden Nugget doesn't open until noon, mister," Millie said, eyeing him curiously. "I'm not here for a drink," Nathan replied, his eyes finding Catherine's. "I was hoping to speak with Miss Norton for a moment." Millie gave Catherine a significant look before retreating to the bar, close enough to hear but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. "Mr. Quinn," Catherine acknowledged him, keeping her voice neutral despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "I've been asking around about your situation," he said without preamble. "Blackwell's not known for his mercy, but he is known for his creative interpretation of the law." Catherine gripped her broom tighter. "Are you a lawman, Mr. Quinn?" A small smile touched his lips. "No, madam. Just a rancher passing through." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I've had dealings with men like Blackwell before. They thrive on controlling others, using fear and shame to keep them in line." "I'm not ashamed," Catherine said, lifting her chin. "I did nothing wrong." "No, you didn't," Nathan agreed, his expression softening. "But Blackwell is counting on the fact that a respectable woman like yourself would rather endure his abuse than fight publicly against a contract that puts her in such a compromising position." Catherine felt a flicker of irritation. "You presume to know a lot about me and my position, Mr. Quinn." "I apologize for that," he said, genuine contrition in his voice. "I'm direct by nature, sometimes to a fault, but I'd like to help you if you'll let me." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "What possible reason could you have for involving yourself in a stranger's troubles?" Nathan removed his hat, running a hand through dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. The gesture made him look younger, less guarded. "My sister was in a similar situation once," he said quietly. "Different circumstances, but the same kind of man. I couldn't help her then. Maybe I can help you now." The honesty in his voice caught Catherine off guard. Before she could respond, the back door opened and Blackwell strode in, his face darkening when he saw Nathan. "We're closed," Blackwell snapped, "and my employees aren't paid to socialize." Nathan replaced his hat, his expression cooling as he faced the lone shark. "Mr. Blackwell, I presume I was just leaving." He turned back to Catherine. "Think about what I said, Miss Norton. Everyone deserves a second chance." As Nathan walked out, Blackwell crossed to Catherine, grabbing her arm in the same spot the miner had the night before, making her wince. "What did he want?" he demanded. "Just being friendly," Catherine answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I told him I was working." Blackwell studied her face, looking for signs of deception. "That man's been asking questions all over town. I don't like people who ask questions." He released her arm with a slight push. "Stay away from him, or you'll regret it." Catherine nodded, returning to her sweeping as Blackwell stalked away. But inside, a small spark of hope had been kindled. Nathan Quinn wanted to help her. Whether his motives were pure or not, it was more hope than she'd had yesterday. That evening, the saloon was even more crowded than the previous night. A cattle drive had arrived in town, bringing dozens of dusty, thirsty cowboys looking for entertainment after weeks on the trail. Catherine moved through the press of bodies, serving drinks and dodging wandering hands with growing expertise. Nathan Quinn was there again, in the same corner table, watching the room with those observant eyes. Whenever their gazes met, he would nod slightly, a gesture of reassurance that somehow made the night more bearable. Around midnight, as Catherine was bringing a tray of drinks to a table of gamblers, the saloon doors burst open. A group of men entered, led by a tall, heavily scarred man whose mere presence seemed to drop the temperature in the room. Conversations quieted, and even the piano player faltered in his tune. "Who is that?" Catherine whispered to Millie as they both retreated behind the bar. "Jackson Porter," Millie replied, her face pale. "Blackwell's partner in the mining business. He's worse than Blackwell, if you can believe it. They say he killed 3 men with his bare hands during a claim dispute last year." Catherine watched as Blackwell emerged from his office to greet Porter with a handshake and back-slapping embrace that seemed at odds with the tension in both men's postures. "Come to my office," Blackwell said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I've got that new shipment you were interested in." As the two men disappeared into the back office, the saloon gradually returned to its normal volume. Catherine continued serving drinks, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over her at Porter's arrival. Something about the way he had looked around the room assessing, calculating, had made her blood run cold. Her instincts proved correct when, an hour later, Blackwell emerged from his office with Porter. The loan shark's eyes scanned the room until they found Catherine. "Girl." "Come here," he called, snapping his fingers as if summoning a dog. Catherine approached reluctantly, aware of the sudden attention from nearby patrons. "This is the one I mentioned," Blackwell told Porter, his hand closing around Catherine's wrist. "The brother's debt still stands at nearly $5,000, but I'm willing to let her work it off in your establishment for a percentage." Porter circled Catherine slowly, his eyes appraising her like a piece of livestock. "She's pretty enough," he conceded. "But is she obedient?" "Learning to be," Blackwell replied with a cruel smile. "A few more weeks here should break her spirit enough for your purposes." Catherine felt sick as she realized what they were discussing. Porter owned brothels in mining camps across California and Nevada, places where women had even fewer protections than in town. "I won't go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Porter laughed, the sound like gravel. "She's got spirit, I like that." He reached out to touch Catherine's face, but she jerked away instinctively. The back of Blackwell's hand connected with her cheek before she could blink, the force of the blow sending her stumbling back against a table. The saloon went silent. "You'll do as you're told," Blackwell hissed. "Or I'll add assault to your debt and send you to Porter's worst establishment tonight." Catherine touched her stinging cheek, tears threatening despite her determination not to show weakness. As she straightened, she caught sight of Nathan Quinn rising from his table, his expression thunderous. She gave a small, imperceptible shake of her head. Getting himself hurt wouldn't help either of them. To her relief, Nathan settled back into his chair, though the tension in his body suggested it took considerable restraint. Porter and Blackwell, oblivious to the exchange, continued their conversation as if nothing had happened. "I'll give you $2,000 for her contract," Porter offered. "That's generous, considering she's untrained." Blackwell shook his head. "$3,000. She's educated, reads and writes." "That's valuable in your line of work." Porter considered this, then nodded. "Done. I'll be back in 2 weeks with the money, have her ready to travel." As the men shook hands, Catherine felt the room spin around her. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, she would be sold to a man whose reputation for cruelty made Blackwell seem kind in comparison. When Porter finally left and Blackwell returned to his office, Catherine continued her duties mechanically, her mind racing for a solution. Running away was impossible. Blackwell had men watching the saloon day and night, and even if she escaped San Bernardino, where would she go? She had no money, no family, no friends outside of town. As the night wore on and the crowd thinned, Nathan approached the bar where Catherine was washing glasses. He placed a folded piece of paper on the counter, sliding it toward her with a finger. "Read this when you're alone," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "And be ready tomorrow night." Before she could ask what he meant, he had turned and walked out of the saloon, leaving Catherine staring after him with the paper clutched in her damp palm. In the privacy of her small room, Catherine unfolded the note by the light of a single candle. "I can settle your debt," it read. "Meet me at the livery stable at midnight tomorrow. Bring only what you can carry in one small bag. Trust me. NQ." Catherine read the note 3 times, her heart pounding. Could she trust him? Nathan Quinn was still essentially a stranger, despite the connection she felt with him. What if this was a trap? What if he had his own plans for her, no better than Porter's? But as she considered her options, Catherine realized she had little choice. In 2 weeks, she would be handed over to Porter. Whatever Nathan's intentions, they couldn't be worse than the fate that awaited her otherwise. Decision made, Catherine carefully burned the note in the candle flame, watching as the paper curled and blackened until nothing remained but ash. Tomorrow night, she would take the biggest risk of her life and pray that Nathan Quinn was the honorable man she believed him to be. The following day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Catherine went about her cleaning duties with forced normalcy, though her mind was far from the tasks at hand. She had managed to hide a small cloth bag beneath her mattress, containing the few possessions she couldn't bear to leave behind: a locket with her parents' portraits, a hair ribbon that had belonged to her mother, and the small silver cross she'd removed when she first arrived at the Golden Nugget. Blackwell seemed in unusually high spirits, celebrating his deal with Porter by drinking more heavily than usual. By evening, he was holding court at a large table, regaling his cronies with exaggerated tales of his business acumen while eyeing Catherine with a possessive smugness that made her skin crawl. 2 weeks from now, I'll be $3,000 richer, he announced loudly as she passed with a tray of drinks. And you, my dear, will be learning a whole new set of skills. The men around him laughed, their eyes following Catherine with renewed interest now that her fate had been declared. She kept her expression neutral, though inside she was counting the hours until midnight. As the evening progressed, Catherine noticed that Nathan was absent from his usual corner table. Had he changed his mind? Or was he simply staying away to avoid raising Blackwell's suspicions? The uncertainty gnawed at her as she continued serving drinks, her anxiety growing with each passing hour. By 11:30, the saloon was beginning to empty, with only the most dedicated drinkers and gamblers remaining. Blackwell had retired to his office with two of his men, leaving the main floor supervised by a burly bartender named Frank, who had always treated Catherine with gruff indifference. "I'm feeling unwell," Catherine told Millie, loud enough for Frank to hear. "I think I need to lie down." Millie, who had no knowledge of Catherine's plans, looked concerned. "You do look pale. Should I bring you some water?" "No, thank you. I just need rest." Catherine squeezed Millie's hand, wishing she could say goodbye properly to the woman who had shown her kindness in this terrible place. "You've been a good friend." Something in Catherine's tone made Millie's eyes widen slightly, but she said nothing as Catherine made her way to the back rooms. Once inside her small chamber, Catherine quickly changed out of her saloon dress into the plain cotton dress she'd been wearing when she arrived. She retrieved her small bag from beneath the mattress and took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The back door of the saloon was watched by one of Blackwell's men, but Catherine had discovered during her first week that the window of the storeroom opened into the narrow alley between buildings. It was a tight squeeze, but she managed to wriggle through, dropping silently into the darkness beyond. The town was quiet at this hour, with only distant piano music and occasional laughter from the saloon still operating. Catherine kept to the shadows, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain anyone passing would hear it. The livery stable was at the edge of town, a 5-minute walk that now seemed fraught with danger at every step. When she finally reached the stable, Catherine hesitated outside the large doors. Once she stepped inside, there would be no turning back. If Nathan wasn't there, or worse, if his intentions weren't what he claimed, she would be completely vulnerable. "Miss Norton." The whispered voice made her jump. Nathan emerged from the shadows beside the stable, his expression a mixture of relief and tension. "You came," he said simply. "I didn't have much choice," Catherine replied, clutching her small bag tighter. "How do you intend to settle my debt? Blackwell won't simply let me go." Nathan gestured for her to follow him into the stable. Inside, 2 horses were already saddled, his own chestnut gelding and a smaller, dappled mare. "I'm not planning to ask his permission," Nathan said, checking the mare's saddle girth. "I've arranged to meet with Blackwell tomorrow morning. I'll present him with the full amount of your debt, $5,000, and the legal documentation invalidating your brother's contract." Catherine stared at him in disbelief. "You have $5,000, and why would you spend it on a stranger's debt?" Nathan's expression softened slightly. "I told you I couldn't help my sister when she needed it. I won't make that mistake again." He handed Catherine the reins to the mare. "But I won't lie to you, Blackwell won't take this quietly. We need to be far from San Bernardino by dawn." The implication was clear. "You're asking me to run away with you. Where would we go?" "I have a ranch north of here near Sacramento. It's far enough that Blackwell's influence won't reach." Nathan paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "You would be free there, Catherine, not indentured to me or anyone else. Once the debt is settled, you can stay or go as you please." Catherine studied his face in the dim light of the stable lantern, looking for any sign of deception. All she saw was earnest determination and something else, a warmth that made her breath catch. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked again, needing to understand. Nathan secured a bedroll to his saddle before answering. "Because no one deserves to be owned by another person. Because I've seen what men like Blackwell and Porter do to women they consider their property." He met her eyes directly. "And because from the moment I saw you standing up to Blackwell in the street, I knew you were someone worth helping." His honesty was disarming. Catherine had encountered few men in her life who spoke so plainly, without ulterior motives or hidden agendas. Either Nathan Quinn was the most sincere man she'd ever met or the most skilled deceiver, A noise outside the stable made them both freeze. Footsteps approached, accompanied by slurred singing. "It's just the stable hand," Nathan whispered, recognizing the voice. "But we should go. Now." Decision time. Catherine looked at the horse at Nathan and thought of the future that awaited her if she stayed. The choice, when viewed that way, wasn't really a choice at all. "Let's go," she said, gathering her skirts to mount the mare. Nathan helped her into the saddle, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Once she was settled, he mounted his own horse and led the way out the back of the stable, where a narrow path wound between buildings toward the edge of town. They rode in silence, keeping to the shadows until San Bernardino was behind them. Only when the town lights had faded into the distance did Catherine allow herself to breathe freely, the night air cool against her face as they urged their horses to a faster pace. "We'll ride through the night," Nathan explained as they followed a trail that paralleled the main road north. "There's a way station about 20 miles ahead where we can rest for a few hours before continuing." Catherine nodded, though apprehension still gnawed at her. "What if Blackwell discovers I'm gone before morning? He'll send men after us," Nathan answered honestly. "But they'll expect us to take the main road. This trail is known only to a few ranchers and miners." As they rode, Catherine found herself studying Nathan's profile in the moonlight. He sat his horse with the ease of a man born to the saddle, his movements fluid and confident. Though not conventionally handsome like some of the dandies who frequented the saloon, there was a quiet strength in his features that she found increasingly attractive. "You said you have a ranch," she said, breaking the silence. "Have you lived in California long?" Nathan seemed pleased by her question. 10 years. Came west after the war with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny. Bought my land 5 years ago when the previous owner lost it to drought." "And your sister?" Catherine asked carefully, remembering his earlier mention. A shadow passed across Nathan's face. "Rebecca was younger than me by 6 years. After our parents died, she fell in with a man who promised her the world and delivered only pain. By the time I found her." He trailed off, the old grief evident in his voice. "She died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," Catherine said softly. Nathan nodded his acknowledgement. "It taught me something important. Evil thrives when good people do nothing. I've tried to live by that since then." They rode in companionable silence after that, the rhythm of the horses' hooves and the vastness of the night sky creating a strange sense of peace, despite the circumstances of their flight. Catherine found herself thinking of her brother Thomas, his charm, his weaknesses, the way he had ultimately betrayed her in the worst possible way. Yet even now, she couldn't bring herself to hate him. He had been broken by their parents' deaths in ways she hadn't fully understood until it was too late. When they reached the way station shortly before dawn, it was little more than a small cabin and corral maintained by an elderly former prospector named Jeb. He greeted Nathan like an old friend, asking no questions about the woman accompanying him or their reason for traveling at night. "You two can rest inside," Jeb said, taking their horses. "I'll keep watch and wake you if anyone comes looking." The cabin was sparse but clean, with a single room containing a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed. Nathan immediately began unrolling his bedroll on the floor. "You take the bed," he said when Catherine hesitated. "I've slept on harder ground than this." "Thank you," Catherine said, suddenly acutely aware of their situation alone together in this isolated cabin, far from the constraints and protections of society. Yet she felt no fear of Nathan, only a growing trust that surprised her with its intensity. They ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack that Nathan produced from his saddlebags, washing it down with water from a canteen. As the first light of dawn filtered through the cabin's small window, exhaustion finally caught up with Catherine. She lay down on the bed fully clothed, intending only to rest her eyes for a moment. When she woke, the sun was high in the sky. She sat up with a start, finding Nathan at the table cleaning his revolver with methodical care. "What time is it?" she asked, alarmed that they had lingered so long. "Just past noon," Nathan replied calmly. "You needed the rest. Jeb's been keeping watch, no sign of Blackwell's men yet." Catherine smoothed her rumpled dress, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "We should keep moving." Nathan nodded, reassembling his gun with practiced efficiency. "Jeb's fixed us some food. Once we've eaten, we'll be on our way." The old prospector had indeed prepared a surprisingly good meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. As they ate, Jeb regaled them with tales of his gold mining days, seemingly oblivious to the urgency of their situation. When Catherine caught Nathan's eye with a questioning look, he gave a slight shake of his head, a silent request for patience. She understood why when Jeb mentioned casually, "Had some riders come through earlier, asking if I'd seen a man and woman pass this way." Catherine froze mid-bite, but Nathan remained relaxed. "Oh," he said, "anyone we know?" Jeb spat a stream of tobacco juice out the open door. "Told him I hadn't seen nobody since Tuesday. They headed on up the main road thinking you'd taken that route." He cackled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Fools never even looked at the ground to check for tracks." "We're grateful, Jeb," Nathan said sincerely. "I won't forget this." The old man waved away his thanks. "You saved my life in that blizzard 2 winters back. Consider us even." An hour later, they were on their way again, taking an even more obscure trail that Jeb had recommended. Catherine felt a new respect for Nathan's foresight. He had clearly planned this escape carefully, utilizing connections and knowledge of the land that Blackwell's men couldn't match. "How far to your ranch?" she asked as they rode side by side, the terrain now allowing for easier conversation. "3 more days at this pace," Nathan replied. "We'll need to stop in a town tomorrow for supplies, but I know a place where Blackwell has no influence." The mention of supplies reminded Catherine of another concern. "I have nothing, no clothes, no personal items beyond what's in my bag. I can't expect you to provide everything." Nathan glanced over at her, his expression thoughtful. "Consider it an advance on your future earnings." "Earnings?" "My ranch needs help," he explained. "I've been looking for someone to manage the household, keep accounts, oversee supplies, that sort of thing. It would be a proper position with a fair wage." He paused, seemingly conscious of how this might sound. "Not that you're obligated to take it. As I said before, once we're there and the debt is settled, you're free to choose your own path." Catherine considered this. The idea of employment, real employment, not the indentured servitude Blackwell had forced upon her, was appealing, and the thought of staying near Nathan. She pushed that thought aside, unwilling to examine it too closely just yet. "I'd like to consider your offer," she said carefully. "I was trained as a teacher before my parents died, but I'm good with numbers and organization as well." Nathan looked pleased. "A teacher? That's fortunate. There are several families working on the ranch with children who could use schooling." As they continued their journey, Catherine found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. The future, which had seemed so bleak just yesterday, now held possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. That night, they camped in a small clearing beside a creek. Nathan built a fire small enough not to be visible from a distance, but sufficient to ward off the night's chill. As they sat side by side, eating a simple supper of dried beef and the last of Jeb's cornbread, Catherine felt a strange sense of contentment despite their circumstances. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, watching the firelight play across Nathan's features. His face softened with pride. "It's not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's good land. 2,000 acres, mostly for cattle, but I've been experimenting with growing fruit trees in the valley portion. There's a main house, nothing fancy, but solid, and quarters for the hands. 5 families live and work there year-round." "It sounds wonderful," Catherine said sincerely. "It can be," Nathan agreed, "but it's hard work and lonely sometimes." He stared into the fire, his expression distant. "I built it thinking someday I'd have a family to share it with." The personal admission hung in the air between them. Catherine felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "What about you?" Nathan asked, turning those perceptive eyes toward her. "What did you dream of before all this?" Catherine hadn't allowed herself to think about dreams in so long that the question caught her off guard. "I wanted to open a school," she admitted. "Somewhere small, where education wasn't just for the wealthy. My mother was a teacher before she married my father." "That's still possible," Nathan said gently. "Your life isn't over, Catherine. It's just taking a different path than you expected." His words touched something deep within her, a hope she had nearly forgotten existed. Impulsively, she reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for helping me escape, but for reminding me that I still have choices." Nathan turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining with a naturalness that made her breath catch. For a long moment, they sat in silence, connected by that simple touch and the crackling fire before them. Later, as Catherine lay wrapped in the blanket Nathan had provided, listening to his steady breathing from the other side of the now banked fire, she found herself wondering what would happen when they reached his ranch. Would this connection between them strengthen, or would it fade once the danger and close proximity of their journey ended? The thought troubled her more than she cared to admit. Morning came with a heavy mist that shrouded the landscape, providing additional cover as they continued their journey. By midday, they had reached the small town Nathan had mentioned, little more than a trading post, general store, and saloon clustered around a dusty crossroads. "Wait here," Nathan said, helping Catherine dismount in the shelter of a grove of trees outside town. "I'll get what we need and be back as quickly as possible." Catherine nodded, though the thought of being left alone made her nervous. "Be careful," Nathan smiled, a warm expression that transformed his serious face. "Always am." He hesitated, then added, "If I'm not back within an hour, take the trail north and don't stop until you reach the river. Follow it west until you see a farm with a red barn. Ask for the Hendersons, they'll help you." The precaution was sobering. Catherine watched as Nathan rode into town, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the mist. The minutes crawled by as she waited, every distant sound making her tense with apprehension. Had Blackwell's men reached this far already? What if Nathan had been recognized? When the hour had nearly passed and there was still no sign of him, Catherine began to contemplate the escape route he'd provided. Just as she was preparing to mount her horse, hoofbeats approached from the direction of town. She pressed herself against a tree trunk, holding her breath until Nathan's familiar silhouette emerged from the mist. "Sorry for the delay," he said, dismounting with several packages tied to his saddle. "The storekeeper was more talkative than I expected." Relief washed over Catherine. "Did anyone ask questions?" "No one that seemed suspicious," Nathan replied, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely certain. "But we should keep moving. I bought you some necessities, clothing more suitable for riding, a few personal items." Catherine accepted the packages gratefully. Behind a screen of bushes, she changed into the clothes Nathan had purchased, a simple but sturdy riding skirt, cotton blouse, and wool jacket that fit surprisingly well. There were also practical items like a hairbrush, soap, and a small mirror. "Thank you," she said when she rejoined him. "I'll repay you for all of this." Nathan waved away her offer. "Consider it part of settling the debt. Blackwell should have provided these things." He helped her mount before adding, "You look more like yourself now." The comment struck Catherine as odd. "You don't know what I look like as myself." Nathan smiled as he swung into his own saddle. "I think I'm beginning to." They rode hard that afternoon, Nathan clearly concerned about possible pursuit. By evening, they had left the main trails far behind, following game paths through increasingly rugged terrain. As darkness fell, they made camp in the shelter of a rocky overhang, the fire kept small and well hidden. "We're making good time," Nathan said as they shared a meal of beans and salt pork he had purchased in town. "Another day and a half should see us home." Home. The word resonated with Catherine in a way she hadn't expected. It had been so long since she'd had a true home. The house she'd shared with Thomas after their parents died had never felt like more than temporary shelter, always one bad gambling debt away from being lost. "Will your people be surprised to see you return with a woman?" she asked, suddenly conscious of what their arrival might look like. Nathan considered this. "They know I went to San Bernardino on business. They'll be curious about you, certainly, but they're good people. They'll respect your privacy. And when they learn about Blackwell, about what I was forced to do, they'll understand that you were a victim of circumstance, not choice." Nathan's voice was firm. "And if anyone suggests otherwise, they'll answer to me." The protectiveness in his tone warmed Catherine more than the fire before them. It had been so long since anyone had stood up for her, had seen her as someone worth defending. As they prepared for sleep, Nathan suddenly froze, his head tilted in a listening posture. Catherine was about to ask what he'd heard when he pressed a finger to his lips, motioning for her to remain silent. In the distance, barely audible, came the sound of voices and horses moving through the brush. Nathan extinguished their fire with a handful of dirt, plunging them into darkness. He moved to Catherine's side, his mouth close to her ear. "Riders," he whispered. "Could be Blackwell's men, could be ordinary travelers. Either way, we can't risk being seen." He guided her deeper into the rocky overhang where the darkness was complete. They stood pressed together, barely breathing as the sounds grew closer. Catherine's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. "Waste of time," a voice drifted to them on the night air. "They're probably halfway to Oregon by now." "Blackwell's offering $500 for the woman, alive and unharmed," another voice replied. "Double that for the man who took her, dead or alive. Worth looking a little longer, I'd say." Catherine felt Nathan tense beside her. 500 for her, 1,000 for him, prices on their heads that would attract every bounty hunter and opportunist in the territory. The voices continued past their hiding place, gradually fading into the distance. Even when the night was silent again, Nathan kept Catherine hidden in the darkness for nearly an hour, ensuring the riders were truly gone before allowing them to move. "We need to change our route," he said grimly. "They're searching more thoroughly than I expected." "They won't stop looking, will they?" Catherine asked, the reality of their situation hitting her anew. "Even after you pay my debt?" Nathan shook his head. "Blackwell isn't just concerned about the money anymore. It's about his pride, his control. A man like that can't allow someone to challenge him publicly without consequence." "I've put you in terrible danger," Catherine whispered, guilt washing over her. "Perhaps I should." "Don't," Nathan interrupted, his voice suddenly fierce. "Don't even think about surrendering yourself to protect me. That's not an option, Catherine." The intensity of his response startled her. In the faint moonlight now filtering through the clouds, she could see the determination in his expression. "We're in this together now," he continued more gently. "And I promise you we'll find a way through it, together." The words seemed to hang in the air between them, laden with meaning beyond their current predicament. Together. It implied a future, a partnership that extended past this journey. They didn't sleep for the remainder of the night, instead preparing to leave well before dawn. Nathan outlined a new route that would take them through even more difficult terrain, a path that would be challenging for horses, but nearly impossible for a larger group to follow. As the first hint of dawn colored the eastern sky, they set off, their horses picking their way carefully along a narrow ridge that overlooked a steep canyon. Catherine, who had never considered herself particularly brave when it came to heights, found herself clinging to her saddle as the path narrowed further. "We'll be through the worst of it soon," Nathan assured her, glancing back with concern. "There's a valley ahead where we can make better time." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She focused on following Nathan's lead, trusting his knowledge of the trail and his horse's sure-footed progress. By midday, as promised, they descended into a lush valley tucked between towering ridges, a hidden paradise of meadow grass and wildflowers fed by a clear stream. "This is beautiful," Catherine said as they stopped to rest the horses. "I didn't know places like this existed so close to San Bernardino." "Not many people do," Nathan replied, helping her dismount. "This valley isn't on any maps. An old Apache guide showed it to me years ago when I was scouting land for my ranch." They allowed themselves a brief respite, refreshing themselves in the stream and letting the horses graze on the rich grass. For a moment, it was possible to forget they were fugitives, to simply enjoy the beauty of their surroundings and each other's company. As Catherine dried her face with a handkerchief, she caught Nathan watching her with an expression that made her heart quicken. There was admiration there, certainly, but also something deeper, a tenderness that spoke of growing feelings neither of them had acknowledged aloud. "What?" she asked self-consciously. Nathan smiled slightly. "I was just thinking that you're one of the strongest women I've ever met. Most people would have broken under what you've endured." The compliment touched her deeply. "I don't feel strong most of the time." "That's often true of the strongest people," he said. "They don't recognize their own courage because they are too busy simply surviving." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Catherine felt the invisible connection between them strengthen further. Had it only been 3 days since they'd fled San Bernardino? It seemed impossible that she could feel such trust, such affinity with someone she had known for such a short time. They continued their journey through the valley, making good time on the level ground. By late afternoon, Nathan announced they were now on his land, the northernmost boundary of his ranch. The terrain gradually changed, becoming rolling grassland dotted with oak trees and the occasional stand of pine. "The main house is about 5 miles ahead," Nathan said, pointing to a distant rise. "We should reach it by nightfall." Catherine felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety at the prospect. What would this new chapter of her life bring? How would Nathan's people receive her? And most importantly, how would her relationship with Nathan himself evolve now that the immediate danger of their escape was fading? As the sun began to set, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, they crested a gentle hill, and Catherine got her first view of Nathan's home. The main house was larger than she had imagined, a handsome 2-story structure built of local stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Nearby stood a barn, bunkhouse, and several smaller cabins scattered beneath ancient oaks. "Welcome to the North Star Ranch," Nathan said, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached, figures emerged from the main house and barn, men and women coming to investigate the arrival of riders at dusk. A tall, gray-haired man stepped forward as they reached the yard, his weathered face breaking into a grin of recognition. "About time you got back, boss," he called. "Beginning to think you'd decided to stay in San Bernardino." Nathan dismounted, reaching up to help Catherine from her saddle. "Had some complications, Frank. This is Miss Catherine Norton. She'll be staying with us." Frank's eyebrows rose slightly, but he touched his hat brim respectfully. "Madam, welcome to North Star." More of the ranch's residents had gathered now, regarding Catherine with undisguised curiosity. A motherly woman in her 50s pushed through the small crowd, clucking with disapproval at Catherine's trail-worn appearance. "Land's sake, Nathan Quinn, dragging a lady all this way without proper rest," she scolded, taking Catherine's arm. "Come inside, dear. I'm Martha Wilson, the housekeeper. We'll get you settled with a hot bath and a proper meal." Catherine glanced at Nathan, who nodded encouragingly. "Go with Martha. I need to speak with Frank about our situation. I'll join you for supper." As Martha led her toward the house, Catherine heard Nathan begin to explain to Frank in low tones about Blackwell and the potential pursuit. The reality of their circumstances hadn't changed. They were still in danger, still facing an uncertain future. But surrounded by the solid walls of Nathan's home and the loyal people who clearly respected him, that future suddenly seemed far less daunting. The bath Martha prepared was the closest thing to heaven Catherine had experienced in weeks. The housekeeper had shown her to a comfortable guest room on the second floor, with large windows overlooking the ranch yard, and had bustled about preparing hot water, clean towels, and a selection of clothing that had belonged to Nathan's sister. "They might be a bit loose in the shoulders," Martha commented, laying out a simple but pretty blue dress. "Rebecca was taller than you, but they'll do until we can get some things made for you." "You're very kind," Catherine said, touched by the woman's matter-of-fact acceptance of her presence. "I don't want to impose." Martha waved away her concern. "Nathan wouldn't have brought you here if you weren't important. That man doesn't do anything without good reason." She paused, studying Catherine with shrewd eyes. "He told me a little about your situation in his telegram last week." "His telegram?" Catherine repeated, surprised. "He sent word about me before we left San Bernardino." "Of course he did," Martha said, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Asked me to prepare the guest room and have Rebecca's things ready. Said he was bringing home a lady who'd had some trouble and needed a fresh start." Catherine sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, stunned by this revelation. Nathan had planned for her arrival even before approaching her with his offer of help. His confidence that she would accept, or perhaps his determination to rescue her regardless of her decision, was both flattering and slightly unsettling. "Don't look so worried, dear," Martha said kindly, misinterpreting her expression. "Nathan's the most honorable man I've ever known. Whatever brought you here, you're safe now." After her bath, dressed in the borrowed blue dress that indeed hung a bit loose on her smaller frame, Catherine felt transformed. Martha had helped her arrange her hair in a simple but elegant style, and the combination of cleanliness, proper clothing, and the knowledge that she was truly free from Blackwell's control brought a natural color to her cheeks that no amount of saloon rouge could have achieved. When she descended to the dining room, she found Nathan waiting for her, freshly bathed and changed himself. He stood as she entered, his expression one of quiet appreciation. "You look," he began, then seemed unable to find the right words, "more like myself." Catherine suggested with a small smile, remembering his earlier comment. He returned the smile, his eyes warm. "Exactly so." Supper was a simple but delicious affair: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Martha had tactfully left them alone to eat, though Catherine suspected the housekeeper was finding excuses to pass through the adjoining kitchen more often than necessary. "I spoke with Frank," Nathan said as they ate. "He's sending riders to watch the approaches to the ranch. If Blackwell's men come this way, we'll have warning." "Do you think they'll track us this far?" Catherine asked, the familiar anxiety returning despite the comfortable surroundings. Nathan considered this. "It's possible. Blackwell has connections throughout California. But we're a long way from San Bernardino, and he has businesses to run. He can't afford to spend months hunting us down." "Unless his pride demands it," Catherine said softly. "Unless that," Nathan agreed. "But we have advantages he doesn't: loyal people, knowledge of the land, and legal standing." "Legal standing," Nathan nodded, setting down his fork. "I've been thinking about this since we left San Bernardino. The contract Blackwell holds, the one your brother signed, it's almost certainly not legally enforceable. No court would uphold a document that essentially sells one person into servitude to pay another's debts." "But Blackwell said Judge Franklin signed it," Catherine reminded him. "Franklin is known to be in Blackwell's pocket," Nathan explained. "A real judge, reviewing the case properly, would throw it out, and I intend to have it reviewed." Catherine stared at him. "You're going to take Blackwell to court?" "Not immediately," Nathan replied. "First, I'll send the money, the full $5,000, along with a letter from my lawyer explaining that the debt has been satisfied and the contract is null and void. If Blackwell accepts that, we may avoid further conflict. And if he doesn't," Nathan's expression hardened slightly, "then yes, we go to court. In Sacramento, far from his sphere of influence. I have friends there, a judge who can't be bought and a lawyer who specializes in cases like this." The methodical way Nathan laid out his plan reassured Catherine. He wasn't simply reacting to events as they unfolded. He was thinking several steps ahead, anticipating Blackwell's responses and preparing countermoves. "Why would you go to such lengths for me?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since he first offered his help. Nathan was silent for a long moment, his eyes steady on hers. "When I first saw you in San Bernardino, standing over your brother's body, refusing to be broken by what Blackwell was doing to you, I recognized something in you, a strength, a dignity that reminded me of Rebecca. But it's become more than that." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I care about what happens to you, Catherine, more than I expected to." The simple honesty of his declaration touched her deeply. "I care about you too," she admitted, turning her hand to clasp his. "I never thought I could trust a man again after what Thomas did, but you've shown me that there are still good men in the world." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Nathan's gaze dropped briefly to her lips before he seemed to catch himself, straightening and withdrawing his hand reluctantly. "It's been a long journey," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "You should rest. Tomorrow, I'll show you around the ranch, and we can discuss your position here if you still want it." "I do," Catherine assured him. "More than ever." Later, lying in the comfortable bed of her new room, Catherine reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few days. From indentured servant to free woman, from isolation to connection, from despair to hope. And at the center of that transformation was Nathan Quinn, a man she was beginning to care for in ways that both exhilarated and frightened her. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the ranch yard as Catherine joined Nathan for breakfast. Martha had provided a hearty meal of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, along with strong coffee that Nathan seemed to consider essential to starting the day. "I thought we'd ride out to see the property this morning," Nathan suggested as they ate. "That is, if you're not too tired from our journey." "I'd like that," Catherine replied. She had slept better than she had in months. The combination of physical exhaustion, emotional relief, and the security of Nathan's home proving a powerful soporific. After breakfast, they saddled up Catherine on the same mare she'd ridden from San Bernardino, which Nathan explained was now hers if she wanted her. The gesture was typical of his thoughtfulness. Catherine reflected as they rode out past the barn and corrals toward the open rangeland beyond. The North Star Ranch proved even more impressive in daylight. 2,000 acres of rolling grassland, dotted with oak and pine, crossed by clear streams that Nathan explained never ran dry, even in the hottest summers. Cattle grazed in the distance, and as they crested a rise, Catherine could see the orchards Nathan had mentioned, neat rows of young apple and pear trees in a sheltered valley. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely as they paused to let the horses drink from a stream. "You've built something wonderful here." Nathan's expression was a mixture of pride and reflection. It wasn't easy. The first few years were touch and go. Drought, rustlers, problems with the bank. He shook his head ruefully. "There were times I thought about giving up, heading back east." "What made you stay?" Catherine asked, genuinely curious. "Stubbornness, mostly," Nathan admitted with a wry smile. "And this land. Once it gets hold of you, it's hard to leave." He gazed out over the rolling landscape. "I realized that even if I failed, I'd rather fail here than succeed somewhere else." His passion for his home was evident in every word, every gesture. It made Catherine wonder what it would be like to belong so completely to a place, to put down roots so deep that they became part of your identity. They continued their tour, Nathan pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the ranch's development. By midday, they had reached a high plateau overlooking the entire property, with views stretching all the way to the distant mountains. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," Nathan said as they dismounted to rest the horses. "When things get difficult or decisions need to be made, I come up here to think." Catherine could understand why. The panoramic view provided perspective, a reminder of both the beauty of the natural world and the relative smallness of human concerns within it. They sat side by side on a fallen log, sharing the lunch Martha had packed for them: cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apples from the ranch's own trees. "I've been thinking about your position here," Nathan said after they had eaten. "You mentioned you were trained as a teacher." Catherine nodded. "I completed 2 years at a women's seminary in Sacramento before my parents died. I was preparing to take a teaching position when Thomas—" She trailed off, the old grief still a dull ache when she thought of how their lives had unraveled. "We have 5 families working on the ranch," Nathan continued. "Between them, 12 children of school age with no formal education. The nearest proper school is 20 miles away in town." Catherine felt a spark of excitement. "You're suggesting I teach them?" "If you'd be willing," Nathan confirmed. "There's a small building near the main house that was originally intended as a storehouse but has never been fully utilized. It could be converted into a schoolroom fairly easily." The idea appealed to Catherine immensely. "I'd need books, slates, other supplies." "I'll provide whatever you need," Nathan assured her. "The children deserve an education, and you deserve the chance to use your training." He hesitated before adding, "The position would come with a proper salary, of course." "I was thinking $30 a month, plus room and board." Catherine stared at him in surprise. It was a generous wage for a female teacher in rural California, more than she would have earned in many established schools. "That's too much," she protested. "It's fair compensation for educated work," Nathan countered firmly. "I pay my men fairly, I'll do no less for you." Catherine was touched by his respect for her skills. "Thank you. I accept both the position and the salary." Nathan's smile was warm. Good. You can start whenever you feel ready. Take some time to settle in first. As they prepared to return to the main house, Catherine found herself studying Nathan as he adjusted his horse's saddle. In the 4 days since they'd fled San Bernardino, she had come to admire not just his courage and resourcefulness, but his fundamental decency, a quality that seemed to inform every interaction he had with others, from his loyal ranch hands to Catherine herself. "What?" Nathan asked, catching her gaze. "I was just thinking that I'm very fortunate you happened to be in San Bernardino when Blackwell confronted me," Catherine said honestly. Nathan's expression turned serious. "It wasn't entirely happenstance. I'd heard rumors about Blackwell's operation, the way he trapped people in debt and forced them into servitude. I went to San Bernardino specifically to investigate those rumors." "You were looking for evidence against him?" Nathan nodded. "I have friends who have been trying to build a case against Blackwell for years. When I heard about a young woman being publicly indentured to cover her brother's gambling debts, I knew it might be the opportunity we needed." Catherine digested this information. "So you approached me as part of your investigation?" "Initially," Nathan admitted. "But once I met you, saw your courage firsthand, it became personal." He stepped closer, his eyes intent on hers. "I want you to understand something, Catherine. I may have gone to San Bernardino with one purpose, but I brought you here for entirely different reasons." The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. Catherine's heart quickened as Nathan reached out to touch her cheek gently. "I've never met anyone like you," he continued softly. "Your strength, your dignity in the face of what Blackwell did to you. I admire you more than I can say." Catherine leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes holding his. "I feel the same about you. You risked everything for a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore," Nathan murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Catherine found herself leaning closer, drawn by a force that seemed beyond conscious thought. Nathan's hand slid to cup the back of her neck, and for one breathless moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, the sound of hoofbeats approaching caused them both to step back. A rider appeared on the trail below, one of Nathan's ranch hands urging his horse at a pace that suggested urgency. "Mr. Quinn," the man called as he spotted them. "Riders coming from the south. Frank sent me to find you." The spell broken, Nathan's expression shifted immediately to concern. "How many?" "6 men, heavily armed," the hand replied, reining in beside them. "Frank's got the others ready. Says to tell you they look like trouble." Nathan turned to Catherine, his face grim. "Blackwell's men. They've found us sooner than I expected." He helped her quickly onto her mare. "We need to get back to the house." They rode hard, taking a direct route back to the ranch buildings. As they approached, Catherine could see activity in the yard, men taking up defensive positions, women hurrying children indoors. Frank stood on the porch of the main house, rifle in hand, directing the preparations. "Get inside," Nathan told Catherine as they dismounted. "Stay with Martha and the other women." Catherine caught his arm. "Be careful, Blackwell's men won't hesitate to kill you." Nathan nodded, his expression softening briefly. "I'll be fine. We outnumber them and we have the advantage of defending our home." Inside the main house, Catherine found Martha organizing the women and children in the large kitchen at the rear of the building. "Trouble coming?" the housekeeper asked tersely, though she clearly already knew the answer. Catherine nodded. "Blackwell's men, 6 of them." Martha snorted dismissively. 6 against 15 on our land. They're either very brave or very stupid." She handed Catherine a loaded shotgun. "Ever used one of these?" "My father taught me," Catherine confirmed, checking the weapon with practiced hands. Her father had believed that a woman living in the West needed to know how to defend herself. "Good girl," Martha approved. "Hopefully it won't come to that, but better prepared than sorry." Through the kitchen window, Catherine could see Nathan, Frank, and several other men positioned strategically around the yard and buildings, weapons ready but not yet drawn. They were waiting. She realized, giving the approaching riders a chance to state their business before assuming hostilities. The minutes dragged as they waited. Finally, the sound of horses approaching reached them, and 6 riders appeared at the edge of the ranch yard. Catherine recognized 2 of them from the Golden Nugget, Blackwell's personal enforcers. The others were strangers to her, but their weathered faces and gun-heavy belts marked them as hired guns. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down one cheek, reined in his horse and called out, "We're looking for Nathan Quinn." Nathan stepped forward from the shelter of the barn, his hands visible but near his holstered revolver. "I'm Quinn. What's your business on my land?" The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "You took something that belongs to Cyrus Blackwell, a woman, Catherine Norton. We've come to take her back." "Miss Norton doesn't belong to anyone," Nathan replied, his voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. "She's a free woman employed on my ranch." "That ain't how Mr. Blackwell sees it," the man countered. "She's indentured to him until her brother's debt is paid. That's legal and binding." "I've sent payment to cover the debt in full," Nathan said. $5,000 by registered mail, along with legal notification that the contract is null and void. This seemed to take the men by surprise. The leader conferred briefly with his companions before responding. "Mr. Blackwell hasn't received any such payment," he said, though his tone suggested uncertainty. "And even if he had, he wants the woman back. She ran without permission. That's theft of services." "That's not how the law sees it," Nathan countered. "The contract your employer holds wouldn't stand up in any proper court. Miss Norton is under my protection now, and she's staying here." The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Through the window, Catherine could see Nathan's men had positioned themselves strategically, rifles and revolvers ready. The odds were clearly not in the visitors' favor, and they knew it. Finally, the leader spat into the dust. "This ain't over, Quinn. Mr. Blackwell doesn't take kindly to people interfering in his business. Tell Blackwell if he wants to pursue this matter, he can do so through legal channels," Nathan replied evenly. "But if he sends men to my property again with threats, they won't leave alive. That's a promise." The warning hung in the air, unmistakable in its intent. After another moment of hesitation, the leader jerked his head at his companions, and they wheeled their horses around. As they rode away, Catherine let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Martha patted her shoulder reassuringly. "They won't be back. Not today, anyway." Catherine wasn't so certain. She had seen Blackwell's vindictiveness firsthand. This retreat was tactical, not final. The next confrontation might not be so straightforward. When Nathan entered the house a few minutes later, his expression was grim but determined. "They're gone for now," he confirmed. "Frank's posted men to watch the approaches to the ranch. We'll have warning if they return." "You think they will?" Catherine asked. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not those particular men. They were hired guns, not true believers in Blackwell's cause, but Blackwell himself. Yes, I think we'll hear from him again." He looked at Catherine directly. "Are you having second thoughts about staying here?" "No," she said without hesitation. "This is where I want to be. I won't let Blackwell drive me away from the first real home I've found in years." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes at her use of the word home, a warmth that transformed his serious expression. "Good," he said simply. "Because I want you here too." The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural to Catherine. While Nathan and his men maintained vigilance against further intrusion, life on the ranch continued its normal pace. Catherine threw herself into preparing for her new role as teacher, working with Nathan and the ranch carpenter to convert the unused storehouse into a proper schoolroom. "The benches are almost finished," Nathan told her one afternoon, 2 weeks after their arrival at North Star. "And the books you ordered should arrive with the next supply wagon from Sacramento." They were standing in what would soon be Catherine's classroom, sunlight streaming through the newly installed windows. The transformation of the building had been remarkable: freshly whitewashed walls, a solid plank floor, a blackboard mounted at the front of the room, and a small desk for the teacher. "It's perfect," Catherine said, turning in a circle to take it all in. "I never imagined I'd have my own school so soon." "The children are excited," Nathan told her. "Mrs. Rodriguez says her boys have been practicing their letters every night in anticipation." Catherine smiled at the thought. She had met all of her future pupils over the past week, 12 children ranging in age from 6 to 16, all eager for the education their parents had never received. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "What if I can't teach them properly?" Nathan's expression was gentle. "You'll be wonderful. You have the knowledge, the patience, and most importantly, the desire to help them learn." His confidence in her abilities was heartening. Over the past 2 weeks, Catherine had come to rely on Nathan's steady presence, his quiet support as she adjusted to her new life. They had fallen into a comfortable routine: breakfast together in the morning, each attending to their respective duties during the day, then dinner in the evening where they shared the events of their day. Yet beneath that comfortable companionship ran a current of something deeper, an attraction neither of them had acknowledged directly since the interrupted moment on the plateau. Sometimes she would catch Nathan watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch, or their hands would brush as they passed dishes at dinner, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "I received a letter from my lawyer in Sacramento today," Nathan said, changing the subject. "Blackwell received the payment for your debt. He's accepted the money but is still contesting the legality of your departure." Catherine's heart sank. "So it's not over." "Not entirely," Nathan acknowledged, "but it's a positive step. By accepting the money, he's tacitly acknowledging that the financial aspect of the contract has been satisfied. His claim now rests solely on the theft of services argument, which is much weaker legally." "Will it go to court?" "Possibly," Nathan said. "My lawyer thinks Blackwell is posturing, trying to save face. He can't afford a public legal battle that might expose his other activities." Catherine nodded, though the thought of confronting Blackwell again, even in a courtroom, filled her with dread. "I just want it to be over," she said softly. "To be truly free." Nathan moved closer, his hand finding hers in a gesture that had become increasingly natural between them. "You are free, Catherine. Whatever legal maneuvering Blackwell attempts, you're not his property. You never were." The conviction in his voice warmed her. "Thank you," she said, squeezing his hand. "For everything." Their eyes met, and Catherine felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Nathan's gaze dropped to her lips, and this time there was no interruption, no reason to pull away. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat, he leaned forward. Their first kiss was gentle, almost tentative, a question more than a demand. Catherine responded with a softness of her own, her free hand rising to rest against his chest. When they parted, Nathan's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of regret or uncertainty. "I've wanted to do that since the day on the plateau," he admitted. "So have I," Catherine confessed, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. Nathan smiled, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentlemanly kiss that somehow felt more intimate than the one they had just shared. "We should get back to the house," he said reluctantly. "Martha will be wondering where we've disappeared to." As they walked side by side back to the main house, their hands occasionally brushing but not quite holding, Catherine felt a sense of rightness that she hadn't experienced in years. Despite the shadow of Blackwell still hanging over them, despite the uncertain legal status of her freedom, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. The school opened officially the following Monday, with all 12 children dressed in their best clothes, hair slicked down or braided neatly, faces shining with excitement and nervousness. Catherine, wearing a new dress Martha had helped her make, stood at the door of the schoolhouse, welcoming each child with a warm smile and a few kind words. Nathan watched from a distance, not wanting to interfere in Catherine's moment but unable to stay away entirely. The pride on his face as he observed her confident handling of the children was evident to everyone who saw it. "She's a natural," Frank commented, coming to stand beside his boss. "Those kids already adore her." Nathan nodded, his expression softening as Catherine knelt to help a small girl find her seat. "She is remarkable." Frank studied Nathan with knowing eyes. "You're sweet on her." It wasn't a question, and Nathan didn't bother denying it. "Yes." "Good," Frank said simply. "About time you found someone worth settling down with." The older man's approval meant more to Nathan than he would have admitted. Frank had been with him since the beginning, had seen the ranch grow from a struggling homestead to a successful operation. His judgment of character was rarely wrong. "It's complicated," Nathan said after a moment. "Her situation with Blackwell will be resolved," Frank finished confidently. "And then there'll be no reason to wait." Wait for what? Nathan didn't ask, though the implication was clear. Marriage, family. The future he had built North Star for but had begun to think might never come. As if sensing his thoughts, Catherine looked up and caught his eye through the schoolhouse window. Her smile, warm, genuine, just for him, made his heart skip a beat. Frank was right. Some things were worth waiting for, worth fighting for. And Catherine Norton was definitely one of those things. The first month of school passed quickly, with Catherine finding fulfillment in her teaching role that exceeded even her expectations. The children were eager learners, soaking up knowledge with an enthusiasm that made every day a joy. Even the oldest boy, 16-year-old Miguel Rodriguez, who had initially been reluctant to attend a children's school, had been won over when Catherine challenged him with more advanced mathematics and readings in both English and Spanish. "They're making remarkable progress," she told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Miguel is already reading at a high school level, and little Sarah Wilson has a natural gift for numbers." Nathan smiled at her enthusiasm. "Their parents have noticed the difference. Mrs. Rodriguez told Martha that Miguel is talking about becoming an engineer someday." "He could do it," Catherine said earnestly. "He has the mind for it. All he needs is the opportunity." "Which you're giving him," Nathan pointed out. "You're changing lives, Catherine, not just the children's but their families as well." She blushed slightly at the praise. "I'm only doing what any teacher would do." "No," Nathan disagreed gently. "You're doing far more. You see their potential, not just their limitations. That's a rare gift." Catherine's blush deepened and she changed the subject. "Has there been any word from your lawyer about Blackwell?" Nathan's expression turned more serious. "Actually, yes. I received a telegram this morning. Blackwell has dropped his legal claims against you." Catherine stared at him in shock. "Truly? But why would he give up so easily?" "It seems he has other concerns at the moment," Nathan explained. "The territorial marshal has opened an investigation into his business practices, based on evidence provided by several former Employees. Evidence I helped gather, Catherine realized, remembering Nathan's earlier admission that he had gone to San Bernardino to investigate Blackwell. Nathan nodded. Your testimony about the conditions at the Golden Nugget, combined with statements from others who were similarly indentured, was compelling. The marshal believes there's enough evidence to bring charges of extortion, false imprisonment, and possibly human trafficking. Catherine felt a dizzying mixture of emotions: relief that Blackwell had dropped his claim against her, satisfaction that he might finally face justice for his crimes, and a lingering fear that somehow he might still find a way to hurt her. "So it's over?" she asked cautiously. "I'm truly free?" "Yes," Nathan confirmed, taking her hand in his. "Legally and in every other way, you're a free woman, Catherine Norton." The weight that had been pressing on her chest since that terrible day in San Bernardino finally lifted completely. Catherine drew a deep breath, feeling as if she were truly filling her lungs for the first time in months. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears of relief gathering in her eyes. Nathan shifted closer, his hand coming up to gently brush a tear from her cheek. "You don't need to say anything, just be happy. That's all I want for you." The tenderness in his eyes undid her completely. Since their first kiss in the schoolhouse, their relationship had developed slowly, carefully stolen moments of affection. Hands held while walking, occasional gentle kisses goodnight. Nathan had been respectful of her need for time, for space to establish herself in her new role at North Star before deepening their personal connection. But now, with the shadow of Blackwell finally lifted, Catherine felt the last of her hesitation melting away. She leaned forward, initiating a kiss for the first time, her hand coming up to rest against Nathan's chest. He responded immediately, one arm slipping around her waist to draw her closer while his other hand cupped her face with exquisite gentleness. The kiss deepened, expressing everything they had left: unspoken gratitude, affection, and a growing love that neither had yet put into words. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've been waiting for the right time to tell you something," he murmured. "What's that?" Catherine asked, her heart racing with anticipation. "I love you," Nathan said simply. "I think I've loved you since I saw you standing in that dusty street in San Bernardino, refusing to let Blackwell break your spirit." The words washed over Catherine like a warm tide, filling empty spaces she hadn't realized existed within her heart. "I love you too," she replied, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. "I fought against it at first. It seemed too soon, too unlikely that I could find such happiness after everything that happened." Nathan smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she had come to adore. "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't expect." They sat together as darkness fell, talking of the future, their future, with a newfound freedom now that the past no longer held them hostage. Nathan spoke of his hopes for the ranch, for the school Catherine had established, for the community they were building together. Catherine shared her dreams of expanding the school someday, perhaps adding adult education for the ranch hands and their wives who had never had the opportunity to learn. As the first stars appeared in the velvet sky above North Star Ranch, Nathan took both of Catherine's hands in his. "There's something I want to ask you," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "I know it hasn't been long, and if you need more time, I understand completely." Catherine's heart quickened. "Ask me," she encouraged softly. Nathan drew a deep breath. "Catherine Norton, will you marry me? Will you build a life here with me, make North Star truly your home, not just as my employee but as my wife and partner?" Though she had sensed the question was coming, hearing the words aloud still filled Catherine with overwhelming emotion. 6 weeks ago, she had been an indentured servant in a saloon, her future determined by her brother's debts and another man's cruelty. Now she was being offered a life of love, purpose, and dignity by a man who had proven his worth in every possible way. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain despite the tears of joy threatening to spill over. "Yes, Nathan Quinn, I will marry you." The kiss that followed sealed their promise to each other, a promise of partnership, respect, and enduring love. When they finally returned to the house, hand in hand, Martha took one look at their glowing faces and knew without being told what had transpired. "About time," the housekeeper said with satisfied approval. "I'll start planning the wedding feast tomorrow." Word spread quickly through the ranch, and by morning, congratulations were pouring in from the hands and their families. The children in Catherine's school were especially excited, asking innocent questions about whether they would need to call her Mrs. Quinn instead of Miss Norton, and if there would be cake at the wedding. Catherine and Nathan decided on a simple ceremony to be held in 4 weeks' time, long enough to make proper preparations, but not so long that it felt like unnecessary waiting. Catherine wrote to a friend from her seminary days who now lived in Sacramento, inviting her to attend and stand as her witness. Nathan asked Frank to be his best man, an honor the foreman accepted with gruff emotion. "Never thought I'd see the day," Frank told Catherine privately. "He's been married to this ranch for so long, some of us wondered if he'd ever find room in his heart for a wife. You're good for him, Miss Catherine. You bring out the best in him." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a happy blur of preparations and anticipation. Catherine continued teaching, now with the added excitement of the children helping to decorate the schoolhouse for the upcoming ceremony. Nathan went to Sacramento to finalize legal matters regarding the ranch and to purchase a proper wedding ring. When he returned, he brought not only the ring but also news that the territorial marshal had officially filed charges against Cyrus Blackwell for numerous crimes. The loan shark's empire was crumbling as more victims came forward with their stories, emboldened by Catherine's example. "Your courage started this," Nathan told her as they walked together in the orchard, now bare of leaves in the late autumn chill. "Because you were willing to stand up to him, others found their voice too." Catherine squeezed his hand. "We did it together. I never would have escaped without your help." "Perhaps," Nathan acknowledged, "but you had the strength within you all along. I just provided the opportunity for you to use it." The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect late autumn day that seemed designed by Providence for such a joyous occasion. The schoolhouse had been transformed with garlands of evergreen branches, late-blooming wildflowers, and ribbons in shades of blue and gold. Benches had been arranged to accommodate not only the ranch families, but also several of Nathan's friends from Sacramento, who had made the journey to witness the union. Catherine dressed in the main house with the help of Martha and her friend Emily from Sacramento, who had arrived the day before. The wedding dress was simple but elegant cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, a gift from the women of the ranch who had pooled their resources to purchase the fabric and worked together on its creation. "You look beautiful," Emily said, adjusting the small wreath of dried flowers that adorned Catherine's upswept hair. "And more importantly, you look happy. Truly happy." "I am," Catherine confirmed, touching the locket at her throat, the one containing her parents' portraits, her only remaining connection to her life before San Bernardino. "I just wish my parents could have met Nathan. They would have loved him." "They'd be proud of you," Martha said firmly, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from the dress. "Of the woman you've become, the life you've made despite everything." When it was time, Frank came to escort Catherine to the schoolhouse. The older man had dressed in his Sunday best, his gray hair neatly combed, his weathered face softened by an uncharacteristic smile. "Ready, Miss Catherine?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready," she confirmed, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The short walk to the schoolhouse seemed both endless and instantaneous. As they approached, Catherine could hear the soft music of a violin. One of the hands was playing a traditional wedding melody. Then the door opened, and she saw Nathan waiting for her at the front of the room, his eyes finding hers immediately. Time seemed to slow as she walked toward him, aware of the smiling faces of friends and neighbors on either side, but focused only on the man she was about to marry. Nathan's expression, a mixture of awe, joy, and profound love, was one she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. The circuit preacher who had ridden out from Sacramento spoke of love, partnership, and building a life together founded on mutual respect and shared purpose. When the time came to exchange vows, Catherine and Nathan had each prepared their own words, spoken with clear voices that carried to every corner of the small schoolhouse. "Catherine," Nathan began, holding both her hands in his, "when I found you, you were trapped by circumstances beyond your control, but your spirit remained unbroken. You showed me what true courage looks like. I promise to honor that courage every day of our life together, to support your dreams, to respect your independence, to be a partner worthy of your trust and love. I will protect you not because you need protection, but because everyone deserves to be sheltered by love. I will cherish you not as a possession, but as the extraordinary woman you are. This is my solemn vow." Tears glistened in Catherine's eyes as she responded. "Nathan, you came into my life when I had lost all hope, and you offered me not just rescue but respect. You truly saw me when others looked past or through me. You gave me freedom, purpose, and a home when I had none. I promise to honor the gift of your love by living each day with courage and conviction, by standing beside you through whatever challenges we may face, by building with you a life of meaning and joy. I will love you not for what you've done for me, but for who you are, a man of integrity, compassion, and quiet strength. This is my solemn vow." As the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Nathan leaned forward to seal their union with a kiss, Catherine felt the final pieces of her new life falling into place. The indentured servant from San Bernardino was gone forever, replaced by Catherine Quinn, teacher, wife, and woman of her own making. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under the stars. Nathan and Catherine moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes with grateful hearts. When they finally slipped away to the main house, their home now, in every sense, the festivities continued without them, a testament to the community's joy in their union. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Nathan traced the contours of Catherine's face with gentle fingers. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Completely," she assured him, nestling closer into his embrace. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "This is just the beginning," Nathan murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." Catherine smiled in the darkness, thinking of all that had brought them to this moment: her brother's debts, Blackwell's cruelty, Nathan's intervention, their dangerous journey north, and finally, the love that had grown between them despite, or perhaps because of, these challenges. "Our whole lives," she repeated, savoring the promise in those words. "Together." Epilogue: 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across the yard of North Star Ranch as Catherine Quinn watched from the porch, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Her students were enjoying their midday break, playing a spirited game of tag while the youngest children built elaborate structures in the sandbox Nathan had constructed last summer. In the 5 years since their wedding, North Star had flourished beyond even Nathan's ambitious dreams. The ranch had expanded to 3,000 acres, the cattle herd had doubled in size, and the orchards now produced fruit that was shipped as far as San Francisco. But the achievement that gave Catherine the most pride was the growth of her school. What had begun as a single room with 12 students was now a proper schoolhouse, with 35 pupils ranging from 5 to 18 years of age. The older students, including Miguel Rodriguez, who had indeed pursued his dream of becoming an engineer, returned during breaks from their studies in Sacramento to help teach the younger children. Catherine had hired an assistant teacher last year, a young woman from town with a passion for education that matched her own. "Contemplating your empire," Nathan teased, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her, his hands coming to rest atop hers on her stomach. Catherine leaned back against his solid warmth. "Hardly an empire, just a school." "A school that's changing lives," Nathan reminded her. "The territorial governor was impressed when he visited last month. He's considering your proposal for expanding rural education throughout the region." Catherine smiled at the memory of the governor's visit, how he had sat in on classes, asked thoughtful questions, and departed with pages of notes and a promise to advocate for more schools like North Star's. "Any word from town?" she asked, changing the subject. Nathan nodded, his expression turning more serious. "The telegram arrived while you were teaching. Blackwell's trial is over, guilty on all counts. He'll spend at least 15 years in prison." The news brought a complex wave of emotion, satisfaction that justice had finally been served, relief that Blackwell would no longer threaten others as he had threatened her, and a strange sort of closure that the man who had once claimed to own her was now himself imprisoned. "Good," Catherine said simply. Nathan pressed a kiss to her temple. "You don't need to worry about him ever again." "I stopped worrying about Cyrus Blackwell a long time ago," Catherine assured him. "The day I married you, in fact." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the arrival of a small whirlwind in the form of their 3-year-old son, Thomas. Named for Catherine's brother, a way of reclaiming a painful past and transforming it into hope for the future, the boy had his father's dark hair and his mother's quick intelligence. "Papa, Mama, look what I found," he exclaimed, holding up a perfectly formed feather with the solemnity of one presenting a priceless treasure. Nathan scooped him up, settling the boy on his hip. "That's a hawk feather, son, very rare." Thomas's eyes widened. "Can I keep it?" "Of course," Catherine said, smoothing his unruly curls. "We'll find a special place for it in your collection." Satisfied with this answer, Thomas wriggled to be put down, eager to return to his explorations. They watched him race back to the yard where Martha's granddaughter, a girl his age, waited patiently for his return. "He's going to be a handful when the new baby arrives," Nathan observed, his hand returning to Catherine's stomach where their second child, a daughter, according to Martha's confident prediction, was due in less than a month. "He'll be a wonderful big brother," Catherine countered. "Just like his father is a wonderful husband." Nathan's eyes softened at her words. 5 years of marriage had only deepened the love between them, each challenge and triumph bringing them closer together. The difficult birth of Thomas, the drought 2 summers ago that had threatened the ranch, the expansion of the school, they had faced each event as true partners, their strength multiplied by their union. "I was thinking," Nathan said, his tone casual though his eyes held a glint of excitement, "that perhaps next spring we might take a trip to San Francisco. The children would benefit from seeing the city, the museums and libraries. And you could meet with the education officials there about your curriculum. Catherine raised an eyebrow, recognizing there was more to this suggestion than an educational opportunity. And Nathan grinned, caught in his transparent attempt at subtlety. And I've been corresponding with a publisher there who's interested in your teaching methods. He wants to discuss creating textbooks based on your approach to rural education. Nathan, Catherine exclaimed, turning to face him fully. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted to be sure he was serious before getting your hopes up, Nathan explained. His letter arrived yesterday confirming his interest. He believes your methods could transform education throughout the Western Territories. The possibility was both thrilling and daunting. Catherine had never considered that her work at North Star might have impact beyond their immediate community. You think I'm ready for something like that? Nathan's expression turned serious. I think you've been ready for this from the moment you stood up to Blackwell in that dusty street. You were a teacher then, Catherine, even if you didn't have a classroom. Teaching others to value themselves, to recognize their own worth and potential, that's who you are at your core. His faith in her, unwavering since the day they met, still had the power to move her deeply. We'll go to San Francisco, she decided. After the baby is born and strong enough to travel. Our daughter will be as strong as her mother, Nathan said confidently, his hand gentle on Catherine's rounded belly. As if in response, the baby kicked vigorously, making them both laugh. Life at North Star Ranch was good, better than Catherine had ever dared to dream during those dark days at the Golden Nugget. From indentured servant to beloved wife, mother, and respected teacher, her journey had been one of transformation and redemption. Later that evening, as Catherine stood at the window of their bedroom watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her as he had done on the porch earlier. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "I was thinking about debts," Catherine replied. "About how my brother's debts made me an indentured servant and how you settled them and set me free." "You've more than repaid any debt you might have felt you owed me," Nathan said, turning her gently to face him. "This ranch, our school, our family, you've helped build all of it. If anything, I'm in your debt now." Catherine shook her head, smiling up at the man who had changed her life in ways neither of them could have foreseen that fateful day in San Bernardino. "No debts between us," she said softly. "Only love." "Only love," Nathan agreed, drawing her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, a future built not on obligation or ownership, but on the strongest foundation of all: two hearts freely given, two lives willingly shared. As the last light of day faded, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above North Star Ranch, Catherine Quinn knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home, at last and forever.